I left that business in what would euphemistically be described as an unplanned departure. You can make it a great inflection point. Two things that I did well, I kind of wish I'd done them in a much more regimented way earlier is, and then I just shot high and sort of held my breath.
There's a ton of knowledge within the community of people that are affected by these layoffs that could have a huge benefit on a wider community of other tech startups and small businesses. So I'm delighted to be joined by David to talk about how to go and find and develop and deliver on those opportunities to go out and consult. So David, thank you so much for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me, Lee. And I think it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing to support people affected by the layoffs. So really privileged to be able to be a part of it.
Talk us through a little bit about your story and how you got involved in consulting work to kick us off.
I'm an accountant by training, then sort of startup CFO, finance leader. I've been working in accounting tech as an entrepreneur for the last decade now, founded and led a business called Chaser, which is accounts receivable, credit control automation at the zero SMB level of the market. So won Xero's Out Partner of the Year award in 2016. And I left that business in the middle of 2020 in what would euphemistically be described as an unplanned departure. So after I knew I wanted to start another business at some point, but I didn't want to start it yet. So in looking around sort of middle of 2020, I just sort of flung up online about in sharing on LinkedIn that I was moving on from Chaser, that I would be available for consulting work. And off the back of that, was fortunate enough to get a bit of inbound demand, did a couple of projects. I mean, that was amazing because it worked really well as a bridge for me between Chaser and Mayday, my next venture that I'm about 18 months into now. And, it was great from a sort of financial perspective. It was great from a, huge range of other perspectives as well. I think it gave me a lot of confidence in what I knew and the value I could bring. I think you learn a lot. It sort of fortifies your thinking by teaching it to others, and helps you clarify stuff that might have been sort of hiding in plain sight. That's the thing. If I look back on it, like you do your job, you do your day-to-day job, you get comfortable with it. And so it becomes really familiar to you. And so it's really easy to just assume, well, that applies to everyone. And there was so much from the ground level up, like the number of conversations I used to have with people about not referring to an accounting firm as a company. You need to refer to it as an accounting firm, not a company. No accounting firm will ever refer to themselves as a company. But that's just a microcosm of how much opportunity there was to help provide people with that foundational understanding that they could then build upon in looking to partner with accountants as a channel to market.
You mentioned that the first thing that you did was just sort of cast the net out, let people know you were available, and it sort of snowballed and developed from there. And so it feels like networking and building that network of folks around you is a really important sort of precursor.
I think that's right. Connect with anyone and everyone on LinkedIn. Make sure your LinkedIn profile does a great job of articulating not just where you've been, but particularly the skills and experiences that you've got from that. The kind of the About Us section, making sure that comes across really, really clearly. And then one thing I did a tiny bit of at the beginning, but then did a lot more of was writing. And writing might not be your medium. If it's not writing videos, fine, but put that one-to-many content out there, and then have your Calendly openly available. Anyone who wants to spend half an hour, 60 minutes, kind of talking around this, because that's such a great opportunity to show what you know. If there's not more at the end of that 60 minutes that business could be getting from you in the form of formal work, then there was never going to be anything there in the first place. Yeah. So all you've done is lost 60 minutes, and ultimately you'll potentially gain from that in terms of the serendipitous opportunities and the word of mouth that comes from it. So I think that was two things that I look back on and I did well. I kind of wish, with hindsight, I'd have done them in a much more regimented way earlier. Is for me writing, but putting some content out there around your kind of expertise, your skill set that other people can derive value from. And then being really liberal about, if anyone's interested, happy to jump on a kind of, jump on a Zoom call, no charge at all, just to chat more.
Yeah, and how did you decide where to draw that line between what you'll give away free in the call versus what then starts to constitute paid consultant work? Because there's got to be a line somewhere, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd never review anyone's documents, and I'd never like look in detail at their product. So I'd only ever be talking, at a high level. And frankly, I'd be sharing my stories.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it would be a case of, okay, here's the situation. And I'd be sharing my experience of an analogous situation, which established that credibility. And then, potentially that's the stepping stone to, okay, would it be great to get, his expertise applied to our situation, which would then be paid work.
If you're an employee at the moment and you're thinking about going down this route, one of the challenging topics that you're going to have to think about is, well, what am I going to charge for this stuff, or what are people willing to pay? And without kind of putting you on the spot to share what you charge, because I know that's kind of obviously private, like, what are the sort of processes that you went through to determine what an appropriate rate would be for you and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, originally I went with analogs of some, consultants I'd worked with on the flip side, previously. And then I just shot high and sort of held my breath, and lo and behold, people were fine with that. Like, people always underprice themselves in this situation because it's the unknown. And, what I'd suggest to people is, and don't even be anchored by what you were paid previously. Like, there'll be plenty of analogs out there. There's plenty of other people who consult in and around the space in different regards. And if anyone wants to message me and we can have a conversation about what I priced and how I priced for the work I did, I'm really, really happy to sort of take that offline and do that. But in my experience, if you're delivering value, there's a lot more scope for you to price than you think there. And also you have to factor in your kind of business development time, and you're a consultant, right? So it's not like you have employment rights. And so, it's a sort of easily severable thing. So don't be overly anchored by what your salary was previously. And like, shoot high. And look, the great thing about it is, if someone's really excited to work with you, and your price is a bit too punchy for them, they're not going to say, oh, then forget it. They're going to come back and say, oh, that, is there anything you can do on the price? Yeah. But if you price too low, the reverse is never going to apply. They're just going to say, okay, that sounds fine, and let's move on. And you've missed out on that opportunity. So, speaking from experience, price high. If you've got value to deliver, people will pay it because they recognize the benefit it can bring.
If you were transported back and you had to start this process again from the beginning, what would you do differently?
I'd have looked like at opportunities to pair up with others as well, in a kind of greater than sum of the parts.
Yeah.
That won't always be applicable, but there'll be some where actually, someone with a complementary skill set enables you to address a broader need and engagement that in isolation you either can't do at all, or you can only deliver a sort of proportion of that, when it comes to it. And I think, in my case, I probably would have recognized the day rate consulting work didn't work, wasn't the best medium for me, like, earlier. That's not to say it can't be the right medium for other types of work, but it wasn't for me. I think it sort of took me 2 bites at that cherry when it should have probably only taken 1. What I found was, it's very difficult to be an individual contributor 1 or 2 days a week in a commercial sense. And it also requires you to kind of really get into the business in a way that you just don't have the bandwidth to, in that sense. Whereas playing the kind of pure coach role, that works much better because that doesn't require you to be sort of intimately in the business day to day. Alternatively, the project-based stuff works really well because you can be deeply immersed in something, you're reviewing the processes, and you can get fully focused on that. But that's why the kind of ongoing day rate engagement was somewhere between the two, and as a result was was probably a sort of flawed construct.
What about processes for you internally in terms of running that consulting business? What did you learn about trying to juggle those plates and organize that side of things for yourself?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one, and I think there are some challenges about being really deliberate with your time. When I got into that coaching program, it was like, okay, I'd have an afternoon a week where with 15-minute slots in between, I'd have all of those coaching calls. And that's really good. I could kind of get into a rhythm of it. But it's definitely, it's a real adjustment moving to that kind of freelance work and having multiple customers. Because it's not that different to having a job where you have lots of different responsibilities to balance, and you have to prioritize and constantly reprioritize. It's just to make sure that you give yourself the scope to do that you aren't over promising to multiple people such that you have at least one customer who's destined to be disappointed.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think is really important that you'd want to flag for anyone that's considering going down this route?
Be really optimistic. Be confident in the knowledge and skills that you have, and just the amazing opportunities that are out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not oblivious to the fact it's a tougher economic climate now to be looking to do this sort of work than it was in the middle of 2020 when I was looking to do it, which probably means you'll need to kind of show more initially in order for people to have confidence that the value is going to be there. But it's worth doing that because there's so many great offers out there. Offers I could have taken that, again, weren't right for me, but might be right for others. So I think above all, my point would be optimistic. If I look back to middle of 2020, that kind of unplanned departure, that it's always going to be a big inflection point.
Yeah. And
so it's essential that optimistic mindset is there. And if it is there, I look back and I think that's sort of living proof that you can make it a great inflection point. Don't get me wrong, you can try a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. I tried a bunch of stuff that doesn't work in doing this, but ultimately couldn't be more thrilled with the outcome that path led me to today. And I really believe that's possible for everyone who's in this situation. Everyone's path will of course be individually different, but can universally be amazing. So I wish everyone luck, but in a sense don't need luck. It's a case of everyone needs a bit of luck every now and then from a sort of timing factors. To kind of pursue it because there are amazing opportunities out there, and ultimately it rests in that sort of internal confidence to seize them.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much, mate. Really, really appreciate your time. And there's so much great advice in there that I'm sure it'll be valuable to a ton of people. So thanks so much, mate.
Thanks so much. Really great. And as I've sort of said before, so I did the thing about open roles in the ecosystem the other week, and there's a really great kind of list of jobs there. And as I put up before, if anyone, if I can ever help, I'm always happy to share sort of half an hour of my time for a Zoom call and provide any insight that might be useful.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.